Hello, good evening. I'm Erica Lukes here with Expanding Frontiers. Welcome to my Friday night show. I appreciate all of you joining us from all over the world. I know some of you stay up very late and get up early to be here with us live in the chat room. Thank you always for providing such great, thoughtful, respectful comments. I can honestly say that this is probably the best chat room with regard to intelligent, forward-thinking dialogue, and I appreciate that about each and every one of you. I also want to give a shout out to Mario, who was behind the scenes helping me do production. He has been an avid supporter of mine for many, many years as the show has transformed from UFO Classified to my new work with Expanding Frontiers, a new nonprofit that we actually started last fall. It's coming on the 1 year anniversary. And you can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out our organization, to read the wonderful blogs. We are getting ready to really go full tilt on the archive. We have some fun things coming in. We have some amazing treasures here, and it's going to be fun. I just spoke with Barry Greenwood today, and we're busy behind the scenes. Jack Brewer, of course, who wrote Wayward Sons, who has also got the UFO Trail blogspot, does a wonderful job behind the scenes, as all of you who follow my show know. He does FOIA requests relentlessly, and we've got some irons in the fire, so this is going to be fun. Follow us if you want to contribute to the nonprofit. That is wonderful. We appreciate your support. So without further ado, I am going to add my partner, Jack Brewer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Erica, and hi, everybody. Good to see you all here.
Yes, fabulous. And then I want to add Paul and then Marsha. So this is going to be a wonderful night, and it's nice to see both of you here. I'm excited about the conversation. I was mentioning before the show started, with so many tumultuous things taking place in the UFO world, it is nice to find grounded people. I keep using that word a lot, but I think that's very important. And over the years, I've watched API and the research that you've done and the thorough way you investigate. This isn't something this is very serious to you. I also, Paul, you were on the show. Has it been a couple years now?
I think about a year ago.
Okay. Since COVID, it's been this time bubble. I don't know what, I don't know if I'm still 20. I'm not quite sure what's happening, but it's been really interesting. So when you were on the show last, what I really appreciated and what I do appreciate now, and I think it's important for the audience to understand, is the amount of integrity that you stress for your organization. That is really critical, and that's something that we don't see typically in the quote-unquote UFO community. And I appreciate the fact that both you and Marsha want to teach people. The website that you have is very thorough. You can report sightings there, and you also teach people how to identify objects, because a lot of times people look up in the sky and they're not trained, and there are so many things that are taking place in our skies now. So if you're seeing a light, or if you're seeing 50 lights, if you're observing satellites or different things, flares, Chinese lanterns, things like that, people have a hard time identifying them. And so you do an excellent job with videos going through, okay, this is what this is how you can empower yourself to really look at things and go on an exploratory process, which I think is really, really wonderful. So
yeah. Well, Marsha's done a lot of those videos. She deserves credit for that, including a lot of case summary videos and explaining why the case was identified as in some cases it's unidentified, but and we don't make the claim that all cases are going to be identifiable or identified. They are about most of them are, but I think that's everyone who's ever been in field investigation will tell you, most of the cases you get, you'll figure out what it was, and some of the cases you won't. And to me, the interesting part is when it's hard to figure out, or even impossible. Then you have to make a case. You have to explain why you can't figure it out. And in many cases, it's not all that weird what was cited, but making a positive identification is difficult for some reason. So, yeah, we do you have a page I just recently created that lists all the more common types of what we call IFOs, that is identified flying objects. And I would encourage everyone to go look at that before you send a UFO report either to us or to anyone else, because we still get Starlink reports now. You know, we thought that was done after everybody knew what Starlink trains look like, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, but we got one just the other day.
Right.
And so, you know, they're still coming in. We still get Chinese lanterns. We still get lens flares. We still get all those. So that's out there. And I think people can learn a lot about the world around them just by being more observant about what's in the sky and looking at it and saying, hey, you know, maybe there's maybe what I saw was just a balloon floating by. Because, you know, a lot of cases, that's what it turns out to be. So
it's fascinating, and I love that, and I encourage people to go, and I'll link your website, you know, at the bottom of the show notes, and also I will, you know, Jack and I like to share information about your work when I'm on Twitter and different social media platforms, which I've been trying to avoid a little bit lately because sometimes you need a break. But I want to, for the audience, just a little bit talk about your backgrounds, because they're both very impressive. And it's really, I'd love to talk to you both, if you don't mind, about that. But Paul, you're an experienced space systems engineer. You've got a master's degree in applied physics from Johns Hopkins University. And you also, you were asked to join aerial phenomena investigations back in 2011. I know that we talked a little bit about that on our past show, but you're a sympathetic skeptic.
yeah,
This
I would
is
say
what
that's accurate.
So,
Yeah.
and I think both Jack and I are kind of leaning a little bit more, I know I am these days, to that. And then I also want to just, Marsha, give a little bit about you, your background. You're the chief of investigations. That must be fun and a lot of work. So I commend you for that. You're the host and producer of a video series for the organization, which is incredible. I was mentioning that. And you also hold a bachelor's degree in science of management at the University of Maryland, University College, and then you have a background in broadcast journalism, which is very cool. And maybe I can get some tips from you, but that must have been fascinating. A radio television production. You're an Air Force veteran with 14 years of active duty as a broadcast journalist overseas, 8 years as a civilian broadcaster working for the Department of the Army in Frankfurt, Germany, and 16 years as a broadcast trainer technician of a nonprofit facility in Washington, D.C. And so that, I mean, both of, you know, your backgrounds are really...
They're both very interesting people if we never talked about UFOs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that we should also point out we have a podcast that we do not as often as we'd like, and Marsha has produced most of those episodes. So, but we do work together on that, and we often will have witnesses in the audio, there's no video, but audio on the podcast, explaining their experiences directly. So.
You know, Erica, I like that you mentioned about the fact that we have a lot of information on our website. But that's due to Paul, of course. But I kind of think of us as kind of a public information organization because we are not interested in clickbait. And we're interested in informing the public about, you know, mundane things that are not mundane to them. And it is an educational process. And a lot of people, I would say, when we get back to them and say this was Starlink or this was a satellite or this was, you know, Venus, lots of times they go like, wow, Wow, okay. I didn't know about that. And so they've been informed, and I like to think they could broadcast out that information to others. Sometimes those are talking around the water cooler events, and it's an educational opportunity, I'd say. And
Yeah.
our website is geared towards that, very much so.
It absolutely is, and that's what I like. And another thing, I remember I was with MUFON, state director for a while, a while back, and it was interesting because people would report UFO sightings, and sometimes different people in the organizations, investigators, would look at that sighting and they would be, oh, well, how could you make that mistake? This was a
Yeah.
light on and be very dismissive
Mhm.
about that. And it really took the wind out of people's sails, and people really want that education. They want to feel empowered. And I think that your positive approach of doing that is really important to keeping people's fascination about looking up and paying attention to their surroundings.
Yeah, and the more we learn too, when we're doing those, we learn more and more. We learn more and more of the tools that you can use that are so helpful these days. Flight Radar 24. Oh my God, how many times has that helped me on a case? And heavens above, how
Right.
many times has that been a perfect answer? Absolute correlated data. Here's what it is. There's really no wiggle room in it. And they go off and say, okay, all right, I'm good. I love that.
Well, most witnesses are grateful when they get an identification. I have some that are hostile too. I mean, not everybody likes to be told that they haven't seen beings from another planet this time. Maybe they will next time, but you know, we get both. But we know that the vast majority of the cases we get in are either going to be too little information to do anything with, or identifiable. And I don't know exact what the proportion is, but it's somewhere around 90%, maybe a bit more than that. That's I'm working on a talk for next October. I'm going to put those statistics together, but I should point out though that we're being honest brokers here, and we say we can identify it. It says that's because we have a clear argument that it's this thing or that thing. It's not because we're trying to debunk them. It's not any explanation in a storm. It's, we found out what it was. And if we don't know what it was, we'll tell them. And some cases, it's just a little flickery light in the sky that for some reason isn't obviously a balloon or some other thing. And we have to say, well, we tried to identify it, we couldn't. But we're not out to debunk. We go to every case with respect and
Yes,
with
you do.
curiosity.
And you absolutely do. And I love that about you. Can you, I'm just getting a couple comments in chat. Is there any way that you could turn up your mic a little bit, Paul? Would that be okay?
Well, okay.
The joys of
I'll
live
just get closer
shows,
to it.
live streaming.
Okay, now it's maxed.
There we go.
All
Okay.
right.
I have 2 preamps in series, and hopefully that's enough. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is add factual information to an experience, and the experience is sometimes very clearly and succinctly described, and sometimes it's not. And what we do is we always, not always, but we really make an effort to get in touch with the witness on the phone and have a long talk about their experience to try to flesh out the details, answer the questions. And sometimes for them, that's enough. They don't want to really discuss it anymore, and they won't even talk to us. They won't answer our emails anymore. Other times they're very highly cooperative, and they want to keep going and get to the bottom of it if possible. And we don't take a position on extraterrestrial visitation. In my opinion, that I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question. And those who are confident that they do are probably the ones that you should turn the volume down on. And those who say, look, there's a lot of questions here that we haven't got answers to. Let's try to get some answers. And, you know, I really hope that we'll get the academic community more involved, and we'll get the scientific community more involved. It's going to be tough because the stigma is still there. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still there. And you would be surprised how many fairly mediocre scientists are criticizing some very distinguished scientists on these subjects, because, you know, that's my area of expertise. But the criticism should happen, and it should be a lively debate. Not, you know, but it's something that I encourage. And I'm, you know, if they want our data, we're happy to supply it. I think there's more of a move toward instrumented data, which is great, but the problem is that it's really hard to get, super hard to get. And I think actually eyewitness sightings of true unknowns are also quite rare. Maybe even rarer than we think. We said 10% based on, you know, Blue Book or the Condon report or something like that. But I think it's actually lower than that.
Yeah, we don't have enough data to really parse that out. You know,
yeah, you don't always know enough.
You know,
that's why instrumented data would be great, but I think we have to combine it with, when possible, some kind of sky surveillance, and also field investigation. When people spot something that's really, really extraordinary, we need to get our boots on the ground, get over there, just like Hynek did in the 60s or 50s. But, you know, with the point being that we want to corroborate what we've already got on instruments, we've got on radar, and, you know, and all that data should, instead of hostility towards letting us have the data, it should be openly, okay, yeah, well, there's not violating anybody's privacy, it's not violating national security, here's the data. Or if it is a sensor that they don't want people to know that they have, then there's ways to deal with that as well. But and NASA's doing a good job of trying to identify sensors that are not classified, not hidden at all. In fact, if you're familiar with the way NASA and NOAA, which is National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, which is sort of a sister agency to NASA, they distribute huge amounts of data to the public all the time. And most people in the public don't you have to have some expertise to understand the data. But certainly the academic community and the the weather forecasting community and this astronomical community, they all have access to these data, and it's a huge amount. And the problem is that we've been filtering out things that don't look right. And we should start saying, hey, the thing that doesn't look right, let's have a look at that. Let's see if it might be interesting. And that's the next step. I
suspect they've had a look at that interesting stuff that they quote unquote filtered out.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've got archives of the interesting stuff that
they
don't want to share.
It's all archived.
Yeah.
Even the garbage, the calibration data and things like that, it all gets archived. They do a wonderful job of that. But they also produce what they call data products. And if you look at a science headline and you see a beautiful picture from JWST or something like that, that's a science product. It's many, many generations of processing from the raw data that was collected by the telescope. And if you looked at the raw data and you're not highly expert in how that data was generated, it won't make any sense to you. It won't look like galaxies or stars. It's just blobs. So it does take expertise. NASA does have the expertise, or they have access to the academic community with expertise, and likewise NOAA has tremendous expertise. NOAA observes the Earth lots of different ways. And they're just one of the agencies that do that. But they have, NOAA has tremendous resources. So
The problem is recently, that we've determined that husbanding data is a big problem. They have reasons for it. It's proprietary, for to a large degree, but it's also secret. And there's been a long, storied history of hiding, husbanding, sequestering data that scientists would really like to get their teeth into. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Alexander Wendt, Dr. Alexander.
yeah,
Now, he called it right what it is. It's just the taboo that is around this subject has, for generations of scientists, made them go away from this in droves. And now trying to get them to come in under the tent and they won't be laughed at. It's going to be kind of difficult to get really good scientists. There's a couple out there now who have been laughed at, and they might be on the right trail. I'm just thinking, you go, a guy from Israel is, wow, did he step out there? And I'm just amazed and proud of him for doing that. Is he right? I don't know, but he stepped out there. Wow.
Yeah, I think Avi Loeb makes mistakes, but he's also, he's so distinguished and has so much tenure, his tenure and all that at a very distinguished university that he can just say what he wants, basically, whether it's, and some of those things are a little speculative and are controversial, but the controversy needs to be had. And that draws people out. There are also people I admire a lot, like Jason Wright at Penn State, who's done a lot of SETI work. He will disagree with Avi Loeb on a lot of things, but let's have that disagreement. Let's have it based on the facts and based on the science and not based on emotion or ridicule. Let's have that discussion. I think it's super. I mean, a lot of stuff is going to turn out to be not to be no there. That's how it's going to be. And I think a lot of people will tell you that, hey, and some scientists, I'm an experiencer. I've seen things I can't explain. I'm a scientist. I know what should be there. And, I'm an astronautical engineer. I know what should be there to a very high extent. And, I know what's in the sky. If something is in the sky that makes no sense to me, I will know it. And it's happened to me a few times. And that's something we all want answers to. The answers are going to be very, very hard to come by. Really tough. Not true knowledge is not something that just comes along and takes you by the hand and leads you off to Candyland. It's painful. And
so if I may, please, people can fill out online a report, or they can even call you and submit their report. And then if you'd each tell us to each of you, how do you perceive what happens then, and what's some of the more interesting aspects of things that have happened in that process?
Okay. Yeah, Marsha gets it. Well, we both get it at the same time, but Marsha deals with it first. So I'll let her.
Yeah, I usually, I'm the intake, and I kind of triage it and learn relatively quickly if a witness is going to be a partner with us. If the witness is not going to partner with us, then we can't conduct a credible investigation. So one of the first things I like to do is make sure that the witness responds to our email, and I got your report, and we've assigned an investigator, and we'd like to ask some questions, and we'd like to be in touch with you. And if I don't get anything back and they leave a phone number, then I'll text them. If I don't get anything back, then we usually just leave it at that, because we can't chase a witness. I won't chase a witness. They've come to us, and if they want to be a partner in the investigation, then we give everything We give it everything. So that's what happens. Typically, I reach out and find out if they're going to be on board with the investigation. And then when we assign an investigator, the investigator then contacts this witness by whatever means they specified, phone call or text or email or something like that. And then we're off and running. And oftentimes the witness will stay with us for a fair amount of time down this path of an investigation. And when they stay with us all the way through, we typically find a satisfactory explanation. But as Paul was alluding to earlier, every once in a while, once they've told their story, and this happens, it's not unusual that people who have had an extraordinary event will, a thing overcomes them, and they are just so transformed by it. Even if it wasn't real, even if they saw Starlink, that's a transformative event for somebody who has never seen such a thing in the sky before. So they have this extra just jazz to them, and so they want to reach out and tell everybody what they saw. And sometimes, oftentimes with the real genuine anomalous experiences that have been, a paradigm shift in this human psyche, they kind of almost get it out as if, this is a strange way to put it, but almost like, when you've taken in too much and you regurgitate and then you go, wow, okay, I feel better. That is almost what happens with people who have seen a thing that so tries their psyche that they need to get it out. And once it's out, then it's almost like they have cleared themselves and they can go on and live a normal life. And lots of times they do, but lots of times they are often running down a rabbit hole that, as you know, sometimes is genuine and sometimes is just fake, hoax, clickbait, and they get more and more caught up in this. And it's kind of tragic in some ways when nefarious types and people who, in my opinion, this is my opinion about somebody who posts a thing that they know is not true and they're getting clickbait or something like that. In my opinion, that is a de facto sociopath. If you are so thrilled with how good you can lie and deceive that you're getting a thrill off that, you're not right. And you're part of the problem here. We're trying to find genuine information. We're trying to put people at ease. We're trying to explain things to people. And you're there doing clickbait and ha, ha, ha in the background about how many people you fool. You ain't right in the head. You're a sociopath. And there's so much of that out there that it just grieves me. It grieves me.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, we try to talk about that on the show every week because there are people that are just genuine. They're looking for answers. They fall into this rabbit hole, and it is really detrimental to their well-being. Yeah. And so I appreciate your position on that. And I think we should hold people accountable who are promoting information that is potentially harmful to other human beings.
Yeah, yeah.
The UFO world has never done that. We've I think people try, and there's just a big, I don't know what it's.
It's whack-a-mole, Erica. It's whack-a-mole. You knock this guy here on Reddit. You say something on Reddit and say, that's not true. It's a fake. And then somebody else will pop up. It is impossible. I used to do that. I'd sally forth at night, and I would type back these Reddit things that I would check. No, Flight Radar 24 says a blah, blah, blah. No, that was the start. And just do. And I'm thinking, no, I am not spending my life trying to fix sociopaths.
Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you for that teaching moment.
I will tell you that I had this guy in the UK, and it's Suffolk, County Suffolk in the UK. He had an extraordinary experience, and it was genuine. I followed that. I followed the breadcrumbs all the way to the end, and there was no answer. and he saw this bright yellow ball come across a long field, and it followed the field. There were little undulations in the field. It followed this field, and it whipped right past his yard. He's out there having a cigarette at 2 o'clock in the morning. He thought nothing's going to happen here. Off goes this thing right past him. It was within 500 feet, so it was a CE. And then it rises right up over his neighbor's thatched roof. We're in England. And off it goes. And what? He was completely unhinged by this. And so he was off down a rabbit hole, so much so that his wife almost left him. And he wrote me, because I'd closed the case. I said, look, I think this is a genuine thing. And so I closed the case, and he wrote me back a couple of times. He was going to contact Greer and try to get him to do a call in of these things with him. But he says, my wife is very, very upset about it. And he says, what do you think I should do? And I said, what I think you should do is let it go. You saw something you can't explain. You will never understand it. You will never understand what happened to you. You have to make peace with it, because you are living in this dimension. I don't know where that came from, but you can't go back there, and you can never explain it. So try to live happily and keep a marriage in this dimension. And if you see something else again, that's great. And you can continue to study and journal it and everything. But if you go down a rabbit hole and lose your marriage, you don't want to do that.
That is great advice. And I think that that's advice that people need to give more often with this, instead of pulling people into their abduction studies, instead of trying to, I talk about this, all the time, because for me, going to different UFO conferences has been a very eye-opening experience. And to see, people early morning, they're going in, they believe, they've been told that they've been abducted, and that they're here as the bringers of the new dawn and enlightenment, and they are, they're special, and we just, to watch these people soak it up, and to have that moment when you're just like, I can't believe that this is happening. This is beyond unethical. This is really, and that these people that are listening to this and absorbing it will have, like you mentioned, a strain with their relationships. They'll lose jobs. They will really become unhinged with that. And so I think, I know that your advice is some of the best advice that I've heard with regard to that. Just let it go. Take your own meaning from it, and live your life.
The interesting thing that brings up too about these people who have, they're quite certain that they've been given special information, and they must go forth with that. And the aliens told me to broadcast this information. And in your book too, Jackie, you're talking about this has been going on for a long time, and frankly, it's been going on long before we had the alphabet agencies. There was some type of, and now I want to get in this area here, because Erica, I heard that you had an inexplicable experience that out in a cornfield or a wheat field or whatever. Am I right? I had a force that scared the bejeebus out of you.
You know what? I had an experience that it didn't frighten me. It was just very interesting. And
you didn't feel a malevolence from it?
You know what? I felt a malevolence from human beings associated with a specific place called Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, is that where that happened?
I am trying to remember because it was, oh boy, the Skinwalker Ranch for me was such that's going to be a book someday when I can write everything down. But that was such an interesting experience to have different brokers from Bigelow, to have different, people try to come into my life. And I think this place, you get groomed, so to speak, and you're told, like the whole world, this is a special, this is a special place, that people are dying, and all of these things. And then you're primed when you go to that location, and then you see things that are probably mundane, but you can read a lot into that because of your experiences of being primed. And so the Skinwalker Ranch for me has been a big learning experience. And I will definitely say at the end of the day, that was very malevolent, but it was the people involved that were negative.
So in retrospect, you do not believe that was a genuine, anomalous, paranormal
Not experience? What I had. No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, as I say, people being contactees has had a long period of this occurring well before the Alphabet Agency. So it
Well, it was about
it
the same
makes me
time as the
wonder.
alphabet agencies came into being.
Not in the 1800s. There weren't alphabet
Well, yeah, but
agencies
I
in the
mean,
1800s.
we have
Jacques Vallée covers that quite well, and I would say I have very good feelings about his scholarship on that. I'm just here to say, of the three of us, can certainly go on record as saying there is some type of something. And, I'd mentioned that to you, Jack. There, in my opinion, there is some type of something that is interacting with us. I don't know what it is, but the vast majority of what's going on is bollocks. And it gets all mixed in with everything else. And now we are so deep down in a swamp. I don't think we can find our way out. Science may be the only thing that saves us. And I don't even have that high a regard for science anymore. I know that scientific orthodoxy is part of the reason where we are now. All the old scientists have to die out before people who can accept that there are things that we cannot yet, where we're developed as a species, explain. We've got a long ways to go.
Yeah, I can appreciate Marsha's position. I can appreciate what your investigation and your personal experience leads you to believe. And I think you would agree as well that when all this stuff gets mixed up together, we can even set aside our personal beliefs when we look at single specific incidents and look at what this person did or what this person wrote, and oftentimes that's not going to have anything at all to do with a potential other or some type of unknown, yet to be better known phenomena.
Yeah.
And we can still certainly respect Marsha's position and people that
Thank you.
that have that point of view. And I wanted to ask you, Paul, Marsha talked some about the ambiguity. How do you come to deal with that? And how would you suggest people just be okay with sometimes the best you can do is just shrug and say, I don't know what happened, but there's a light bill to pay, so I better go to work,
Yeah, well, as I've gotten older, I've begun to question whether I'm ever going to find out anything about this whole field.
No.
Other than the human malevolence
Sorry, Paul.
that Eric has already mentioned. We know about that. We know about the grifters and the
ne'er-do-wells,
con men, and the would-be prophets of the saucers. In fact, anybody who listens to Aaron Gaulius's podcast, which I strongly recommend, Saucer Life, you get a good grounding in the history of that. Going way back, and he's probably the best read of anyone I've ever met on the whole contactee thing and the anyway. But I feel that in my own anomalous experiences, which have not been very high strangeness, but I may never know what that was. That's just, and I think I can accept that. I can deal with that. What I can't accept is doing nothing about it. Somebody's got to make some progress. And as we know, the history of science is full of very long periods of struggling with things that finally you get a breakthrough, and then there's a period of rapid progress, and you get a new paradigm, which is what some people might call an orthodoxy. But those paradigms are extremely useful for making slow, steady, incremental, and careful progress, and then you get a new one, and then the new one is messy for a while, but then it settles into a paradigm. And I am optimistic we're going to get one of those paradigm shifts. Maybe not next year or even next decade, but we're going to get one. And right now I think we're, with respect to UFOs, we're a proto-science. We don't really have a science of UFOs. We're about where people were in the 17th century with respect to electromagnetism. No good theory, some observations that were fascinating. Didn't realize that a lot of the phenomena were all part of the same thing. No way to know that. And then in the 19th century, James Clerk Maxwell publishes his theory, and boom, we've got it. We understand electromagnetism. Not perfectly. There was some more work to be done, but it was, it took hundreds of years to get there. So, and that's true of lots of things. Up until the late 18th century, everybody thought not everybody, but everybody, the Western orthodoxy was that the Earth was 6,000 years old. Mm-hmm. It took some brave people to step forward and say, you know what, doesn't make sense. It's much older than that. And
of course, they got drawn and quartered for it, but
no, they didn't actually. But they were largely ignored at first. Because they never said God doesn't exist. They said God took a lot longer to make the world than we think, and then subsequent generations took that and ran with it. But that's the kind of thing. It took hundreds, even thousands of years to accept how old the Earth really was. And the numbers that we finally came up with that have been stable for a few generations now are way, way bigger than anybody could have thought. Huge. I mean, you talk to any geologist or any astronomer, you're going to get numbers that just you can't get your head around. Billions of years, hundreds, tens of billions of light years, hundreds of millions of years for continents to move around, things that just don't, that in the human experience are
unfathomable.
Nothing but calculations. And I think that with UFOs, we have not got our heads around even the most basic things. We're not even asking the right questions yet. And so what volunteer organizations, all we can do is collect data, talk to people, and point out where more and better information is needed. And I think that I'm moving to that last chapter now. I'm saying, okay, beyond field investigation, which is what API does. That's what we do, is field investigation and public education. There's more, and that more is going to require some professionalism and some intense work and some money. And I don't know where the money's coming from, but I think it's out there. And I just hope that it's not being scuttled by exceptional claims with no evidence. And we all can think of a few examples of that. And, zero evidence for those claims. And then, or even lots of evidence that they're false. And then, here's the good example recently that's nobody's going to disagree with, I hope, was the flares over a Marine base. For 2 years, some people were investigating that and saying, "Hey, look at that triangular UFO up there." In 2 days, it was completely debunked.
Yeah.
And but if you go around throwing these claims out there that are completely easily debunked, by anyone who's willing to be persistent enough to look closely at the data, you're going to really hurt the field. And so you have to be careful about what claims you make, and you have to be, and you have to support those claims with evidence, and you have to, instead of trying to prove it, you have to try to disprove it.
Why do people make those claims? What you've got to? I'm trying I cannot figure.
It's clickbait.
Are they trying to? Well, yes, but are part of these?
They get a lot. They get a lot of hits on their YouTube channel and their website.
But not the guys that are showing up, raising their hand and talking about what they know. That if they are knowingly sowing disinformation, then there's got to be a motivation for it. And I struggle to find a motivation unless it is to further muddy the waters. I mean, I don't know.
Well, it could, poisoning the well is one possible. If Adam Gorightly's book goes into that in a lot of detail, saucers, spooks, and
who benefits from such activities? Who benefits? You've got to, when you follow the money trail, and I remember, Erica, you were talking about that on one of your podcasts, you just follow the money trail and it gets you kind of where you want to go. That and FOIA agreements get you where you want to go. So when you follow the money trail on that particular genre that we're talking about here, where does that trail end up?
I think it ends up, unfortunately, changing politics, changing, you see, especially specifically with the Knapp, Corbell kind of crowd, and Bigelow is one of the biggest political donors in the United States. I mean, he really shapes campaigns for whatever his political motivations are. I mean, he's a, businessman. So,
Why did Bigelow buy all that MUFON information? Why did Bigelow buy all of Brian Veitch's information from Canada? Why?
So here's my thought. I think that he was studying the way people give information, I think it was a psychological profile. I think that, we look at what happens with Cambridge Analytica and different things now where you can go on and mine data about personal beliefs or experiences, and you can manipulate that and pull people into a rabbit hole. And then you've got like QAnon, or you've got some of these conspiracy theories going on, and you can easily lead people. And so I really feel Bigelow's motivation was personal, and it didn't have anything to do with UFOs. It was more about manipulating people.
Now, if that is so, I find it intriguing that Bigelow went from building terrestrial hotels for a living and building space hotels and or space habitats for a living. That was kind of an interesting leap. After he buys a bunch of MUFON stuff, now he decides he's going to build space habitats.
Well, he lost money on the space habitats, I'm pretty sure.
He might in the short term, but we'll see how that goes.
That's completely gone. Bigelow Aerospace really doesn't exist anymore. So.
Don't they have those little inflatable habitats that are attached? They were attached to
they built one, station. But they don't have them. They're not building anymore.
Bigelow Aerospace.
It's defunct now, huh?
Yeah.
And Bass was part of Bigelow Aerospace, but it was pretty much a separate entity. So
it's strange. Strange bedfellows in this field. And
I actually read some of Bigelow's documentation, and I guess I wasn't supposed to have it. I probably shouldn't admit that, but it was actually very professional. The aerospace, the people on the aerospace side, very professional. They did a good job, but they're not working for him anymore.
Well,
I think when we get into the whys, I think that virtually all of the ideas that get put on the table are correct depending on different circumstances. And I think the parable about the blindfolded men trying to figure out what an elephant is kind of applies. And I don't mean just to UFOs. I mean to what people in the UFO community are doing and why they're doing it. I think there's a lot of different reasons. And Erica's saying some, and Paul's saying some, and Marsha's asking and saying, well, wouldn't it maybe be for this? Probably all of the above. And we have to take a specific example, like, are we talking about Simone Mendez, or are we talking about Kit Green? And we're going to have different scenarios of what happened to people and what's going on.
Yeah. And Kit Green's someone who should know better. But, well, so are lots of other people. I mean, you look at the folks who who originally took Uri Geller in and were trying to show that he actually had psychic powers. Some of those people are still around. In fact, they're all still around.
Right.
They got it very wrong. Uri Geller is just a mediocre magician who is very good at using that to fool people. Well, that's what magicians do, is they fool people.
But yeah, when you look at the macro on this, you can see that there's a lot of shenanigans. The 30,000 foot view, there's a lot of shenanigans. But to your point, Jack, when you dig down in there, now you're looking at the micro. Now you've got this granular evidence, and you see that there are, along this huge amount of crapola, there are gems in there that are, I don't want to use the word irrefutable, but damn near irrefutable. There are gems in there that are probably true paranormal events that will remain unexplained until we have some type of higher learning or capability. They exist there. I think they have been written about through the ages, and they persist. And I think there's a reason that genuine anomalous experiences exist, is because there is somewhere, somehow, a genuine anomalous thing that is occurring.
Maybe you're right, Marsha. Maybe you're right.
And we can just not say. And we have such, our inboards and our peripherals and all of our software and everything. We are so specially tuned to just be right here and see this spectrum and hear that frequency and understand. And our little limbic system does what it can do to get itself through the world. But other creatures around us have a whole different intake and understanding. And we're here in the same dimension, on the same plane, living the same lives together, and we are wholly, extraordinarily different. And we all exist together. And so if you were to add into the mix, and again, we just don't know everything. We are just babes when it comes to science. We're still suckling on our bottle, trying to figure things out. But if a person were to be able to understand that theoretically, there are these other dimensions, and it's just a little simple brain to get from one to the other. Can you traverse a membrane into another dimension and come into this dimension with still clothed with your ability in the other dimension? Say, I was to go into a two-dimensional world, and somehow when I extruded into that two-dimensional world, I kept my three-dimensional capabilities. My God, wouldn't that be extraordinary in a line world? And there's an explanation for it, because because we've come from this world. And I rather think, Paul, you're talking, I almost wonder if how we finally get the evidence that you're looking for might be in theoretical physics. Because if we think that things could occur, maybe we can actually not just posit it, but prove it. I think that might be where we get some traction here.
Well, I think theoretical physics is, they can, everything that we can scientifically explore in the everyday world has a good theory. So a very, very well verified theory. So, I don't think you're going to find any woo-woo in modern physics. You might find some advances in physics might lead us to some really exotic new concepts. But right now, we're already dealing with some very exotic things in modern science that nobody would have thought of 100 years ago. Whether it's black holes or the holographic principle or quantum information, all that stuff is just, the human mind hasn't really caught up to it yet. But it's real. It's verifiable. We have a lot of data. And, in UFOs, we want to get to that point where we have a lot of data. For example, in the 1960s, we had a satellite up there that was there to monitor Soviet and Chinese nuclear testing. It's called the Vela satellite. And it could sense gamma rays, which are very high energy electromagnetic radiation. And it started seeing these massive explosions going off every day, almost every day. And it wasn't the Chinese, it wasn't the Russians. It took a little while to puzzle through. They realized there was a completely new phenomenon out there. Gamma ray bursts, they called. And nobody ever thought of that was even possible. It took about 20 plus years to really nail down what they were, where they were coming from. And we still don't have a perfect theory of gamma ray bursts. But, that was an example of something that just surprised us. And it took a lot of very expensive scientific investigation to figure out what it was. There's other examples of things like that. And there's other things examples where the theory led and got it right, and the observations followed. For example, black holes were predicted in like 1916 or 17, something like that, at least in abstract principle. And it took another 50, 60 years to actually say we know that they exist. So, we have, there's so much possibility. There's a world of possibilities out there that haven't been explored. But I'm optimistic because I think we have a really good history of the human mind wrapping itself around very strange ideas, and to the point where they become almost normal ideas. Like Einstein's relativity is weird. When you're a young teenage physics nerd and you're looking at that, you say time and space shrinking and contracting and simultaneity being different, that doesn't make sense. But now, for 100 years later, here we are, almost 120 years later, that's just normal physics. That's just how we see the world. So, I'm optimistic because humans have the ability to over time, generation to generation, sometimes it takes hundreds of years, but we eventually get these concepts, even if they're exotic and weird and strange to us, we still eventually, we get them and we make them work.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes, we do. Jim, who was staying up very early. It's very early where he is. So thanks, Jim, for always being here and giving such great questions, giving us good feedback for the show. So he wants to know what you know about T. Townsend Brown's Byfield's work on
I am not an expert on Brown, but I have not seen anything that was particularly compelling. So I'm probably not the guy to ask. But I think that we do have an extremely good theory of gravity. We know it's an excellent theory that's passed every test we've thrown at it. And if you're going to say, well, I can beat gravity this way that general relativity doesn't predict, the burden's on you, baby. You got to prove. We can talk more about the burden of proof later, but you have to show why that is. And to my knowledge, there's no data. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I think that if there was anything that even slightly violated general relativity, the scientific community would be all over it. It really would. Now, some people are just really bad at presenting their ideas, and they don't never get the funding to generate the data they need. So, but over time, that gets corrected. So I'm skeptical, but show me the data. That's all I can say about that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to just really quickly, I've got friends from all over the world here, and Helga from Norway is here, and he always sends me, in fact, I've not seen some pictures from you. He lives right in Hessdalen. And so,
wow.
Cool.
Yes, so it's so much fun. I had a wonderful time visiting there. I can't wait to go back. And so I need pictures, but anyway, thank you for, again, being here, and Jim. I mean, it's just fun to see people from all over the world listen to the show, and Michael and Scott. So I just want to give you guys a shout out and thanks. And Drew, thank you so much for being here. And I love doing this show and having people like you. And it's a real pleasure. So I just had to say that.
And you get to go visit them, huh?
I did.
You went to Norway, and
yes.
Man, that's so cool.
It was so much fun. I was there. I'm trying to think.
Did you go to Hessdalen?
I did. I was there, and I went during science camp. This was 2018, I believe. And so Erlingstrand was just absolutely wonderful. Picked me up from the airport, drove. I mean, it's quite a drive to drive from Trondheim to Hessdalen, and we were there watching the kids. No, they're not kids. I sound like Grandma Moses every time I do that. Back in the dark ages when
the students, yeah,
but the students, just to see them, they had a kind of a community center where that was like the base camp for everybody, and they set up their instrumentation, and then you'd go to the blue box, and then the students would go up. They had 3 different locations on peaks of mountains where they would set up things and be out there. And it was just bitter cold, and I was only there in the fall. And I know they did this during the winter, but it was really cool to hike up there and get in a tent and see these people just out there and seeing things, collecting information, learning how to use science. And it was one of the most, I think, liberating and cool 2 weeks of my life. It was wonderful. And
that's kind of analogous to STEM here, isn't it? What they were doing, the STEM program here with young scientists.
I don't know.
Those were young people, right?
Tell us a little bit more about that.
The science. You know about that, Paul, right? STEM.
Well, yeah.
To get kids into science, and
I think these were probably more like grad students or undergraduate students.
When you say kids, you're talking these were college age.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
College age kids,
which are kids to me.
College age kids go to camp.
Young whippersnappers.
My kids are college age.
Oh,
they're kids.
Yeah.
I thought of kids, like 13, 14, 15 going to camps. And, but okay. All right. I understand.
I know I'm dating myself. I mean, I'm pretending like I don't know what, who knows.
I think of professional football players as kids. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think of almost everybody as a kid. The Hessdalen's really cool. I wish we had more spots where we could go and expect at some point we're going to get some observations that are interesting. We don't have very many of those spots. And Hessdalen seems to have be one of the rare exceptions. Most of the time UFOs show up when they want to. Most of the time they're not really UFOs, and they don't repeat. They don't come back.
That guy from NARCAP, I can't remember his name right now.
Ted?
Ted Rowe. Didn't he contact you, Paul, about an area that he thought there was ongoing anomalous activity?
I'm not going to go into any details on that.
But that didn't pan out, because that was several years ago.
I wouldn't say it didn't pan out, but I didn't really
I mean,
make
you
a
don't see
deep
any
enough
data from it.
investigation of it. But and I know Erica's familiar with that situation. But
That's what's the bane of this business. You're trying to bring normal science and science methodology to kind of an abnormal subject, and it's so daunting because this stuff does not repeat, and you can't do these experiments on it, and so you have to rush your resources to a place that appears to be active.
I went to the place, but there was a huge brush fire just like 3-4 miles away from there. I did not want to proceed and get close to it. And I only had a couple of days.
North Carolina had some promise for a while, Brown Mountain
lights. Yeah. I'm on the fence about those.
I don't think that's been debunked.
It's
not just a normal.
Depends on who you ask, I think. I haven't personally investigated that enough to have an opinion. Some people think it's great. Other people think it's the lights from trains. The Marfa lights in Texas, most folks think those are headlights, and they have some good evidence that they're headlights on a very distant highway. And we've seen other cases where, headlights on a distant road when the cars are going up and down hills and come into view and coming out of view, can look weird. But they're just headlights.
But there was some talk too, if I recall, about the geology being such that it would create light, because we know such things occur, and that these might be specified areas where this light, becomes a plasma ball for a period long enough for an observation, and then because plasma doesn't last very long, but I mean it does enough to go sometimes. So I was thinking,
I don't know if there's any really good instrumented observations of that. Headstone lights are the one example I know where there are instrumented observations, because people have made a big effort to make that happen. Not so much these other places. The other place that you're referring to, Marsha, you might go out there for months and not see a single thing. Yeah. So
you go out with a case of beer in your shirt too.
Well, no.
That's what they do.
Well, my shirt sleeves, yes.
We're going to see the Marfa lights
because it gets hot out there. Well, certainly a lot of people have gone out to see the Marfa lights and have seen them, but that doesn't.
Yeah, there's probably something to it.
James Bunnell, I would love to get James Bunnell on the show, because he did a pretty significant study for many years at Marfa. So that would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what data came out. Because I don't think if it was, it would be, published.
Thing is, with drones, you ought to be able to go right up to them, and that is, I don't think anybody's done that. So, because you could get drones that can go 10 miles, and come back. Or 20 miles and land, and you have to go find them. But you can. It should be a fairly easy research project to get right up on it.
That's a good point.
If it's really if it's as close as people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys, on your website, you have some, as Erica was mentioning, you have some really good instructional videos. You have the Field Investigators Toolkit and a lot of information about ideal camera circumstances and things like that. If someone wanted to volunteer and get into this, what should they expect would be ahead for them?
Well,
frustration.
You got to kiss a lot of frogs.
There's
and you have to go.
A lot of people want to join because they're going to chase UFOs, and we don't chase UFOs. And they're thinking, well, I got all this stuff here, I want to chase UFOs, but we don't do that. They come to us.
I do it, but I haven't caught one yet.
Yeah.
UFO. I once told somebody, I don't think you chase UFOs. UFOs chase you, and and maybe someday you'll notice that I'm doing that. But the
basic research, really, Jack, is the main thing we do, and you can have a lot of equipment, and it doesn't mean you aren't going to find stuff, but real, just basic bread and butter research using common tools for the most part is how we solve most everything that we do solve.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the pandemic, I basically stopped doing site visits for a while. I'd like to continue doing that. Like get more local cases. We used to get mostly local cases. We now get cases scattered all over the world. I would love to get some more Maryland and Virginia cases that I could actually go, or Delaware, be fine. Even New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where I could actually go and do the site visit and make really learn something from doing that. Not every case merits that, clearly.
And by then the phenomenon has gone,
we're not gonna see it again. That's
but,
not.
But when you are in it, at the site, you have a pretty good idea, and you can. I did a site investigation.
I've done a few, and they've been more rewarding and more. I think we get a deeper feel for what really the witness really saw. But you can't.
Yes.
Most cases aren't worth the trouble because they didn't see much, or they didn't see anything that was
typical
hard.
Misidentifications. Yeah. Although there was that case, Paul, in New Jersey, where that guy at Pennington, New Jersey, was walking, and he saw that he looked up what looked like an airplane, and then he said, "Boy, there's something special about this." And then it was really big up in the sky, and then it came down real close to him. It became small. It's about 6 foot in diameter. And then he was facing it, and then he realized he was facing the opposite direction, and that thing had then flipped over on its side and became two pieces. Two perfect circles. That was a green circle and a red circle. And in front of him, and he was 20 feet away, in front of him, they began to kind of sniff around the lawn. And they did this kind of sniffing thing here. And the green one kind of seemed to go a little farther. And the red one, he said, in his mind, the red one kind of almost like it looked up and said, "Oh, I'm getting too far behind." And it followed up to this one, and they flopped up over a house, and they were gone. And when I went and saw him, you're thinking, he's right there in the middle of a heavily urban area. And it's one of these cases where you would think multiple people would say, "My God, did you see that?" Blah, blah, blah. But they didn't. It was just a singular sighting, an extraordinary sighting by a singular person that was inexplicable. I couldn't explain that one.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of sighting where the site visit is really helpful, because you can walk the area with them and have them show exactly where it's standing and so on.
Google Earth doesn't tell you where that tree, was 3 feet when Google Earth did it, but now it's here. And so, so what did you see behind that and that type of thing? But we don't have any funds. We don't get paid to do this, and we do it. I like to do it and hop in my RV and travel and do things that way. But Paul still works full time, and so he's got to have those cases around the
kids in college.
Yeah.
To answer Jack's question, there's going to be a lot of tedium. But you will get to talk to people who've seen UFOs on a regular basis, and you'll get. But the way we work, we like to document everything. We want to we'd have a checklist of things that we look at, and we want to don't leave anything out that it might possibly have been. So we look at satellites, we look at meteors, we look at
the
weather, high altitude balloons. Yeah. And sometimes you have to call the local police or the local 911 center or whatever and ask, did you guys have anything? Or the local airport. Was there somebody in the tower at the time that the sighting was? Did they see anything? The answer is almost always going to be no. You have to keep going. And so that's, but if somebody wants, I think we could take on one or two more field investigators now. I have a backlog of cases I need to finish up. And Marsha does a lot of the other cases that come in.
I would say the biggest thing is managing expectations of new investigators.
Yeah.
I would say that if you can manage expectations coming in, then you might have an investigator that lasts for a while. But that I found out that is tantamount because people have an understanding. And again, they're chasing UFOs and they want to prove that aliens exist. And we're agnostic. We're not proving, we can't prove aliens exist. We just can't, but we can prove if it was a satellite there. But those are the things we can prove. And I think, honestly, who makes a really good investigator for our organization is somebody who just likes to do research, because that's really how you're going to find things out. Somebody who likes to do research. And we would love to get somebody who's a real wonk at doing a database, because Paul is so busy and he can only do so much. And we keep decrying that we need a database because we have so much stuff. We have, just so much that we could put out that people could cross-reference. Places like Newfork has a lot of information, but it is absolutely uninvestigated. And I can go through there and see if something has occurred that might correlate to a case I've got. There were 3 or 4 other in sightings that were reported in about the same time frame. That's something I can work with. But I also look through there an awful lot and I say that Starlink, ISS, this was lens flare. And so that, even though it's a lot of information, it is not a gold mine of information. We have a gold mine of information that we cannot get out there because we're just toiling along.
We have a community too with different skill sets that could really complement one another. Yeah. Like you, Marsha, you're a Air Force veteran, broadcast journalist. Would you tell us some about what you did and then how you find it beneficial to API, please?
Yeah. Now here's the interesting thing, and most people don't want to hear this, and I know my military compatriots don't want to hear this, but having spent 20 years in military communities, 14 years active duty, I can tell you unapologetically that you don't have real journalists in the military. They are not journalists. They are a mouth organ for the base commander. Now, that is all you do. And you do not publish anything that is contrary to what the base commander wants out there. And I'll give you a perfect example. In Japan, at Yokota Air Force Base, there's an awful lot of GIs who were married to Japanese women. And an awful lot of these GIs would try to get Korean short tours to get away from their Japanese wife to go over to Korea and be mischievous. Now, Japanese wives were starting to jump off the large buildings of the military. They were starting to take headers because one gal came in once to one of our guys did this, came in and said, "Why have you sent my husband on yet another short tour to Korea? He was just there 2 years ago and now he's going again." And my commander said, "We didn't do that. He volunteered." Which, oh my God, you should have seen the poor things just fit straight. Okay. Now, here I am. I'm going to go out and do this story. I got my video camera and we're getting information and shooting how high that is up there. Of course, there's no body, but then I got the story all together. Base commander called through the public affairs office and said, "You ain't putting that on the air. I do not want it known that people are so miserable here. They're diving off 6-story buildings." So right then I got it. Okay, I get it. And I went from being in the journalist portion of it to being in the production portion, because there I can do real work. I could not do real work as a journalist. And I understand that. That is not why I was hired. I was not hired to create problems for the base commander. I was hired to do grip and grins of the guy who just made lieutenant colonel is going to be taken over as staff advocate or whatever. That was the gig. I understood it. So I opted out of that and went into an ancillary area, which was production. And that brought a lot of joy. And so that was what I did all the rest of my career, was teach broadcasters how to write a story, how to shoot the video, how to put it into a multi-track presentation, put in graphics, add music, poop it out at the end as an on-air product and put it on the air. And that's what I did for years and years and years. And it was very gratifying. I got out of the journalistic portion of it very early on. But so that's really what I did. And because I worked as a broadcaster, I was always overseas. My husband and I spent 20 years overseas because you didn't need American news and information in California. You could turn on any channel. You're over in Germany, you're over in Spain, you're over in Italy, you're over in Turkey. You don't get that. So we supplied American voiced entertainment and news and information and feature material overseas. Wow. It was just the greatest gig. I loved it. And it gave me a profession that I've used all the rest of my life, and have taught others. So it's been a very, very gratifying career that I had. And it was all because of the Air Force. The Air Force gave me everything. I signed my life over to them. I told them I'd give them my life. I literally signed on the dotted line. If you call me, I will give my life to this country. And fortunately, I was during the Cold War and I never got shot at. But because of that commitment I made and the compact we made, they gave me a career. They gave me training. They paid for my bachelor's degree. And I found my husband, my best friend. 46 years we've been married, just yesterday.
Congratulations.
Oh, God, it's just been great. Oh. And I often tell people to join the Air Force because it's very different now. So I don't know about that. All I know is the Air Force been very, very good to me.
Thank you. I just have to ask you, did you have any problems as a woman?
Well, I'll tell you what, Erica, this is very interesting. When I came in October 1975, they were just then starting to let women into the military academies. Oh, there was a hue and cry. But, that's how we're going to do it. So, when I first got in there was a transition of the old brown shoe Vietnam era, Korean War era out, who, were very manly men, and they had specific ways to do it. And when I came in, everybody was then, there was this inculcation that this is what mattered here. It wasn't if I was brown or black or female. Right there, Joe. If I've got more of those than you do, the conversation is over. And that was the deal breaker. And so the beauty of being in the military was that's what matters over that. And it doesn't matter anything else. So there were still, men will be men, and you had to do some corrective action. But for the most part, I did not have a problem. I know there certainly were some, but I've never had a problem asserting myself. And I know some women did. I just wasn't one of them.
Good. Yeah, it is interesting. And I'd love to talk to you off air sometime, just with my experiences with a military spouse and
oh yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, I've met some amazing women in the military, and just really, it's wonderful to have those connections. So,
yeah, there's not a lot. When you look at the population, there are only about 7% of the United States population that is veterans. I work and volunteer at our local American Legion post, and we're getting more and more women veterans that are coming in, and I'm very heartened with it. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to talk a little bit, because I've been, obviously Simone Mendez, but all three of you have done excellent work on over the years, and I've been listening for multiple times to the interview that you did with her. Can you give us some thoughts about that, and how, after talking to her, how that impacted you?
Yeah, well, that was totally unexpected. Jack had written about her in his book, his earlier book, The Grays Have Been Framed, and as possibly an example of someone who was disinformed. But when I spoke to her, well, first of all, she is on the spectrum. So she's a little vulnerable, kind of a vulnerable person. She was an attractive young woman, single woman in the military, a very low rank, and she was kind of vulnerable, and I should give a very quick summary of her experience. She was shown a document. She had a top secret clearance. She worked in a communications center where her job was to decrypt messages and send them out to whoever is supposed to receive them. And she was shown a document by a colleague that indicated that somebody had detected UFOs, possibly NORAD. And the document looked official to her. She'd seen lots of documents, so you would think she would know. For some reason that she can no longer explain, she kept the document for a while in her possession. And this got her into a lot of trouble. The document was labeled top secret. She went through a lot of emotional turmoil, got pretty bad. And she was investigated for several months. She was never prosecuted, but they stripped her top secret clearance from her, so she could no longer work where she worked. She had to do more clerical work and so forth. Stayed in the Air Force for a little bit longer. And at one point was recruited to go to a UFO conference, which I thought was interesting, and report back on it. Anyway, she was, that left me with, first of all, this is a real person with a real experience in this area. Talking to that person is very different from reading a book about it or an article. But I still don't know if she was the target of disinformation or if she just was collateral damage or what. I'll never know. She says, I don't take a position on that. She doesn't have a point of view. But it's a fascinating story. It's not as well known as the Benowitz story or some of the other stories, but I recommend people go listen to that conversation with Simone Mendez. She tells her story as she remembers it, and I think she's being very straight and honest with us about it. She ended up in the hospital, and she doesn't remember everything that happened in the hospital. So I don't know if she was, given drugs, whatever, but.
And I'd just like to interject, Paul, and she has documentation. Barry Greenwood helped her obtain some of her service records and some FOIA information from Office of Special Investigations and the FBI that corroborate her story for all practical purposes.
Marsha, what are your thoughts
about her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read about that, and when you're in the military and people have a higher rank over you, there's no questioning. You wouldn't even think to say, well, that sounds kind of wacky to me. I don't think I'm going to do that. But had people done that, I remember one time in the military, I knew a person who knew a person that the CIA was interested in investigating. CIA was, the military component of the FBI, whatever. And so they called me in to talk to me, and they were real rough and gruff. And I said, look, you are barking up the wrong tree. I don't have anything to say to you, and I'm leaving, and I'll have my judge advocate get in touch with you. That's the last I heard out of them, because if they can get you, all these types do. They have certain operators that know how to get you. And if, like Paul was saying, you're vulnerable, or you're just, scared and everything, and they will get you. And now they have you, they can handle you. And God only knows what. I don't know what happened to her, but that type of person, civilian or military, is, I'm sure, a great tool for the things they want to do, but there can be maliciousness with it, and I don't really know what to say. I did not have experiences like that with them, and I thank God. I don't really know anybody who did. But when I read about her, I felt bad for her, because that's one of those things where now you're left with, you don't really have a true understanding of the reality, and they did that to her. They usurped her ability to make reasoned conclusions about things. Now that's wrong. That is wrong. Why they did that, I don't know, but it was for their own purposes. It sounds nefarious on the face of it, but then we're often asked to stand back and consider whether or not that which we find reprehensible in operation or nefarious might in the end be some hero doing really, really hard, ugly work. And if that person didn't do the really hard, ugly work, we don't know maybe what would happen to us. So that is a possibility. I don't know. When we're talking about the UFO field and everything, is there a plan, an Uber plan, that some type of force or entity or power or whatever is coming in and meddling with us, and that we have human agents that are able to fight against this non-human agent to, correct some problem or keep us safe or whatever. I know that's what they try to sell. We're doing these ugly things to protect the American people. Now, I've seen them do ugly things to protect the American people, and they've just been damn lies to protect power. Now, I know that happens. So I'm at the point where I just don't trust anything. I've seen so many people lie and so many people be fooled, and so much nefarious, malicious behavior by normal humans that I'm very unsettled, as so many people are right now, hearing much of this come out of Washington. People who really want the ETH theory to be the thing, because they're really invested in aliens coming to save us. So they're not going to want to hear anything other than the validation of what they want. And so some people are going to give that to them, because I don't know. I'm just so unbalanced, as most people are. I really just cannot come down on anything. I mean, can you? When you think about it, you just don't have enough to. There's so much.
And we're kind of getting into one of your latest posts about Airman Pat. That is just fascinating. And again, we've got the. We don't know what the spooks were doing, but they're in there. And once the well's tainted, I start feeling like just all bets are off when people are using false names and
sure,
don't know what's going on.
Yeah. That was pretty riveting. His story was pretty riveting.
It was.
And there are a lot of stories like that, but unfortunately, they're stories.
But people of that era are just now starting to come out, because for a long, long time, when you are in the military and they really configure you really get configured, getting spewed out of basic training, and then you go into your field of work and they really configure you further. So like that airman, he knew not to question this Colonel Kowalski or whatever. He knew there was something not right, but he had no ability to question it. It was absolutely yes sir, 3 bags full, okay, and that was
he was a 19-year-old kid. He got scared to death.
I'll tell you what, if he was a 30-year-old staff sergeant, he still wouldn't. He wouldn't say, "Oh, you're full of
Yeah, I
BS."
mean, if I were the 59-year-old civilian I am now, it would rattle me pretty good.
Yeah, because those guys know how to psychologically abuse you and take away your power. That's what they do. They just pull your power out. And now you're standing there vulnerable, and all you can do is say, "Okay."
For those watching, go to API's website, aerialphenomenon.org, is it?
It's just go to reportaufo.org and then click on the tab that says home, and it's right there.
Yeah, and you can listen to this interview that Paul did with Airman Pat, which is essentially about 1975. He had some strange events happen with the people he worked with at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. And then enter the spooks, stuff goes
following
sideways.
UFO activity. Yeah.
And stuff goes sideways. And after I listened to it, Erica listened to it, I listened to it. I looked around in newspapers.com and at least found corroborating articles that stuff was happening. And another interesting aside, Marsha was saying this is when they had just started further indoctrinating females into the Air Force. And one of the things that Airman Pat had said in his story was that it was at that time they were teaching them to answer the phone differently. Instead of "How can I help you, sir?" it was "How can I help you, sir," or "ma'am."
Yeah.
And anyway, it's a fascinating interview. It's a fascinating story. I was looking for newspaper clippings to see what else I might could FOIA, and I'll be working on that this weekend. And
good.
God bless you for that FOIA thing. I would slit my wrists.
Well, you don't
FOIA just, oh my God, no.
Have to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking that we needed because we're still not sure exactly what the date was that happened, but he did say there was a hot scramble of F-111s, which can't be that common an event for that Air Force base. So just get them to, fess up to a hot scramble.
They might have excised it from their flight logs. That doesn't mean anything. No, they would use subterfuge, and they just rip paper right out of logs from submarines. You go there and isn't that interesting? That whole thing that event that happened just yesterday, that whole thing just got ripped right out of that log thing. Nothing you're going to do about that. But what I think might help, Paul, is if people listen to that and somebody who was on that base at that same time frame, it was a big base, big flight line.
Yeah, unfortunately, the one person he mentions was
he said his full name.
The Captain Staff Sergeant Zondor, who was a Korea veteran, who was the dispatcher that night. He died in November of 1976. So he would be the guy I'd want to talk to, but he'd be quite elderly by now.
The airmen would have talked about that amongst themselves. They would have discussed that, and of course, it wouldn't get out any farther.
What I'd really like to find is the radar operator who got transferred out like the next week.
Yeah, got shipped out.
If he knows anything about it, if he's still alive, I'd love to talk to him. But
can I ask you really quickly, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions from people who don't know about what takes place in the military or the government with top secret clearances. Mm-hmm. And, in the UFO world, and specifically what we're seeing now with the latest batch of the clown show, the usual suspects, you've got people who have allegedly leaked information, leaked videos, and people that are coming into this. And because somebody has a secret clearance, I think the general public thinks that that actually means they have the keys to the kingdom, which is absolutely not the case. And so can you educate us a little bit about clearances? And that would be really wonderful.
Well, I've had a secret clearance, and I can tell you that there's millions of people with secret clearances out there, and it doesn't get you access to anything that you don't have a business to know about. In my case, it was all very mundane stuff that would bore you to tears.
And it's compartmentalized. I mean, that's part of it too.
Well, yes, there's a need to know, even at a low level of classification. At a higher level classification, it's even more strict, and people are trained not even to talk about it, but not to even talk about that they know it. All right. Don't even mention that you have access to top secret information.
I can answer Erica's question on one point there, though. I would say that most military veterans, they understand they took an allegiance for life. You don't undo your oath of allegiance to the United States, but that allegiance is to the United States and its people. It is not to the government in power, because the government is not the country. The government has been given a mandate to help the country navigate through certain things, and it is very prescribed what the government can do. Military people take an oath to their country and the people who are in that country, and that's who they have an allegiance to and adhere to. Now, I can see that if somebody who was maltreated or found that there was subterfuge to the point where they lost their sense of loyalty to the military, that does not presuppose they've lost their allegiance to the country. And so I could see where some people, I would do that if when I was in Turkey the first time in 1975, I saw something I could not explain. Now, had that been a base activity and I was on where I had to make note of this, I must annotate this in the log because it's regulation. And so somebody comes by and all, you did not see that, blah, blah, blah. Well, that would mess me up. Now, down the road, 20, 25, 30 years later, I would think to myself, I tell you right now, I'd think, well, I'm sorry, I'm not adhering to that regulation. 3510 regulations has no effect on me now. And so I would tell them, I would say, yeah, I saw blah, 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 and this was it. And I would come forward with what I knew and hopefully bolstered with some documentation. But so I can't say that just because somebody is talking about top secret things that it's misinformation or maladroit principles. I think there could very well be a reason that they think it's best for the good of the country and its peoples that this information get out. That's my thought on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, but Erica's right that just having a top secret clearance does not give you access to anything other than what you're supposed to be working on. Absolutely.
That doesn't mean people don't talk, at the NCO club after work, if they're in the same field, I know people will talk amongst themselves. If they were working right next to the same radar op, then they will talk about that and discuss that amongst themselves. But I don't know that they would, run to the local TV station and talk to anybody about it. No, they would not do that.
Not if they want to stay out of the brig.
No, they wouldn't do that. Because they're still active duty and they could
But,
they could get in trouble.
50 years later, they might.
They might.
They might very well. So, yeah. We've not had a lot of military people come to us and say, hey, here's what happened to me when I was on active duty. And we have some people who say, I can't talk about what happened to me when I was on active duty. But the vast majority of our witnesses are either civilians or ex-military, but they're not talking about experience they had in the military.
Now, I just got a case that that I can't investigate because it's too old, just like the one that Paul had. And this was a Navy guy, a sailor who was stationed at Key West. I forget the name of the naval base there, but it was just outside of Key West. And this was 1968, 1969. And it was a Saturday, and he and his buddy were driving along the Keys, headed towards Miami to see his buddy's father and mother. And they were going to take the weekend off. And on their way, they were driving along and saw off the Keys this very bright object. And it came at them. And just as they were reaching a bridge to cross, this thing came over and stopped. In fact, it wasn't a thing. It was 3 or 4, as he recalls, in unison, as if they were one thing, just, here goes the car. They looked up. And of course, they were agog. There's nothing they could do. And then whoosh, off they go. And they went and settled on this little island off from the road where they were. And this guy who was the passenger wanted to talk to the driver about it. And the driver said, don't ask me a thing about it. I will never talk to you about this. And he never did. The guy tried to bring it up. No, he would not talk about it. He has the guy's name, but he wouldn't talk about it. And this is something he reported, just recently. And he gave a very clear description of these objects. And he just wanted to pass that along because it was the thing that happened to him. And he felt like at this point in time, he could talk about it. And he didn't have a secret clearance or anything, but and I don't think he even told anybody on the base, which was probably a smart thing to do. He was wise there. Yeah, I think they're going to come through more and more. I think more and more people are going to be talking about it, especially because now you're hearing these people are coming, that press conference that was held in Washington, D.C. I remember I was down there and working in D.C. at the time. What was it, 2008-ish? And they had this press conference, and a whole group of military and civilians got up and talked about the things that had happened when they were in the military. And so I think since
Greer,
those people,
right? That was the disclosure.
Yeah, disclosure project.
Yeah, it may have been,
Which then was, tainted by a few really dubious witnesses, and then B, by all Greer's grifting after that. So it's unfortunate.
I don't know if you can.
Probably some of those people did have a good story to tell.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not fair to taint everybody with that same color, because many of these didn't know Greer from a hole in the ground. All they knew was an opportunity that they could talk about something that mattered deeply to them and thought the American public should know. And so they didn't know Greer's reputation. But I think that certainly some of them, I believe, were truthful and honest and truly spoke about incidences that impacted the readiness of the United States at the time they were entrusted with the safety of the United States of America. And that bothered them.
And it is true that you see people like Greer who's so, he's telling the truth and free energy and all these, he's like this, he is a cult figure. He's a cult, icon. And it was interesting. I was speaking in a conference with him, and it was just like, I tried to go backstage to give the PowerPoint, or to give my presentation to the audio visual guys. And it was like, don't come back here. He's back here. He needs space. Just like, and then he had like his little group of, his security,
his posse.
Oh my Lord. I'm like, really, it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I actually got a moment to speak with the Almighty, and I remember he had a parrot on his shoulder. Somebody had brought a parrot, and I'm just like sitting here talking to Stephen Greer with his posse around him, and I'm just like, this is like some
surreal
movie. I mean, this is really interesting. But
every time I see Stephen Greer, and it's terrible to say this, but I swear to God, I am immediately reminded of one of those reptilians.
Yes, I was just going to
say. Scares me because he looks like, right? I mean, yikes.
Then there's a reverse conspiracy theory. I mean, there you go. It's like
I don't know
been,
anything about it. I can't say, but
yeah. Well, I mean,
because I don't go in there. I do not go in there.
that's good.
For a long time, when I first early started in this field, I was immersed in it. I mean, I ate it. I slathered in it. I was just everything I could find out about it. And then at a point in time, I kind of came to. And I often tell this story, and you're sick of hearing it, Paul. But I came to because I started at Aerial Phenomenon Investigations, and Antonio Paris taught me how to investigate, which gave me a BS meter. My BS meter was, I couldn't discern anything because what I saw was not believable, but it happened. And so somebody would tell me something that happened that was unbelievable. I'm thinking, well, I know what you're talking about. It happened to me. So yeah, it happened to you. So at this point, then everything is real. And you're living in this, what they call this, there's a term for it, like a fantasy world. I can't think of the name, but anything is possible. So everything is possible. At a point in time, you can get educated and come out of that, and you can get a BS meter and you can calibrate it, and you can keep calibrating that BS meter and it will stay true. All you have to do is take in data and information and leave out that which cannot be data and information that is trusted. And when you take all that stuff in and you lay it out, then you see this pattern, and this pattern is going to help you proceed in a credible investigation where you can probably find the most probable explanation for what was seen. Yes, this is possible. You could have seen a light ship. It's possible. But the data is, it is most probable you saw X, And so I got a well-calibrated BS meter, and that is missing in a lot of people. One, because they're just, for lack of a better term, I mean, literally, they're ignorant of the things that are going on up in the sky. I mean, the stuff we get on Starlink, as much as it's been up there, we still get people who are sending this in. Oh my God, what is that? So there's a lot of ignorance out there, a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of people. I don't know if it's just what's happened to us in the last 20 years, but people just do not put any thinking on. There's no discernment. They see it and they think, oh, that must be true. There is no discernment, no appreciable discernment in the public anymore.
And that should really be, those should be classes that are taught from grade school on.
Yes, and that's one of the things I like about our website is this helps you discern that thing you saw. Perfectly good explanation. And there's other things here that you can see. Now, these are perfectly good explanations for stuff your friends have talked to you about. And you go forth. I mean, really, you can get empowered with information. You can become empowered with information because the lack of information and disinformation, the propensity for disinformation, unempowers the human.
Yes, to apply a reasonable amount of healthy skepticism is liberating.
Yes.
And allows one to pursue their interests in healthy and functional manners. Rest assured, Marsha, you're talking to a couple of people that had to increase their filters as well because I mean, you come into this, and if you're a reasonably sincere and honest person, you expect other people are as well.
Yeah, and to our detriment, huh?
Yeah, and so then, then you have to become a little more skeptical, or will just be led down the garden path to madness.
Yeah. Now the problem with that is there's an opposite and equal issue in skepticism, and you know where I'm going to go on that, and that is that a person is saying, because magic was so much crapola here, magic doesn't happen. You can't go there. Magic happens. Anomalous occurrences happen. They have happened since antiquity. And now if one is a skeptic to the degree that they stop thinking there could be magic, there could be something we don't understand, there could be a phenomena, then there's a detraction there too. I'm not saying you guys are there. I'm saying that there's both sides of this meter that need to be calibrated to intake truth and relevance and credibility. All that is, and that's not easy to do, but it really is empowering to do that.
It is. And I'll give you this. There is a militant type of skepticism that, because and it is the other side of the same coin of, to a hammer, everything's a nail. And so to
Yeah.
a true believer, everything is an alien. And the other side of that coin is nothing's about aliens. And so they're just as uninterested in the Paul Benowitz and Simone Mendez cases because there's no alien in it. And that is an unhealthy form of skepticism to me. That is also a certain type of ignorance that is overlooking relevant circumstances because it's not going to reveal the fantastic. And there's some really important stuff going on in some of these stories that doesn't have to be about, the proverbial little green men. And I very much agree that it's liberating and it's empowering to, as Paul has said, and as Erica has talked about as well, to look to refute or to support, and as you're saying, Antonio taught you some basics and some skill sets, some methodology about how to sort out facts from just stuff people say.
It's interesting. One of the biggest things, Paul and I talk about this all the time too, is the witness. How the witness can be so it's not malleable. It's the witness makes a bad witness. Lots of times.
Influenceable.
Every human being has their biases and their blind spots. I do. If I knew what my blind spots were, would I want them to gone? Maybe. I'm not sure. So you have to be humble. Say, look, we all get things wrong. We all have little dogmas that we treasure, and we all have memories that aren't accurate, and
experiences
perception
that weren't.
We can misperceive things very easily. Just go to a magic show with a good magician, and you will misperceive 100 things that night, and you won't even realize it. And it's that's just how we are. That's how our brains work or don't work. And so when we talk to witnesses, we have to have that empathy. That hey, I could have made the same mistake. I may have more knowledge than this person about some things, but I can be led astray.
They're right until we can prove they aren't, and usually then they will say, "Oh crap, maybe I didn't do that."
Well, like that's the problem.
This case I had with this guy in California was sitting outside, and he was talking to a friend overseas, and he was just chatting. He happened to look up, and he saw his telephone pole has this thingamajig on it that is like a regulator or something, and out of that came this blinding light, filled up the whole thing, and it was just like out of Star Wars, and then it went whoosh, and it went off that way, and he was really. Man, he was telling me about that, and I'm taking all these notes and listening to him. I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be an interesting case. Okay, so I'm going to start getting into this. Now, the first thing I do is I look at Flight Radar 24. Yikes. there was a plane that was coming into landing at exactly that time, exactly towards him. And it was covered up pretty much coming in, the bright landing light covered up pretty much until a certain point where it became bigger than the telephone pole. And so it appeared to just come out of this telephone pole. And that plane took a hard bank and came in and set up for a landing at a nearby airport. And I thought, oh, I love those. I love those. If I can figure out what a guy saw, I love those. Paul likes those he can't figure out. I like the ones I can. I'm thinking, gotcha. And so I let this guy know. And I'm telling you, at first he said, no, that can't be, because he had such an experience. He was so high on it. And then that information settled in. I said, look, I know how you feel about this. I mean, everybody's like this, but it's irrefutable that you had an optical illusion that caused this sighting that was so fantastic. And I showed him the exact trajectory, the exact timeline, exactly where he's sitting. 2 days later, he says, well, I think you're right. Wow. Okay. Well, thanks. But up to that point, I mean, it was wow. And that where our cases are rife with that.
Huh. And I just appreciate the fact that you're actually diligent and caring, and you educate people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, that's why I respect both of you, and I respect your organization, Aerial Phenomena Investigations. This is such your website is beautiful. The videos that you've done, I mean, well, the video work, the podcast.
That's just a theme in WordPress.
Oh, stop it.
No, I mean, this is really exceptional. And this
Thank
is,
you. That's
when you
very, very nice.
Well, and you look at other UFO organizations that have been around for 50 years and things, and they don't have what you have with such a small group of people doing this. And so it's exactly, what we need.
And that's probably formula. We aren't 50 people wide that you cannot manage. You can't, I think manage 50 people.
Right.
There's one thing that that distinguishes us is we share all the data we can about our completed investigations. You don't have to
no identifying information, and
anyone who's interested can go look. Yeah, you won't find out who it was or what their phone number was, but you will find out what they observed and what we found about what they observed. And if we couldn't figure it out, we explain what the weaknesses of the possible explanations were. Or if we could figure, or there are times when we have doubt about the explanation. We may say, well, yeah, this kind of works, but we have to make some assumptions. That's the kind of thing that you want to do. And you want and we've always said, if you find a fault with one of our investigation results, come tell us. And if we agree,
and they have, and we've corrected,
they have, and we will change change our conclusion. We never get so dogmatically committed to a case that, that we can't turn back. And you've seen researchers like that, where they are so committed to whatever it is, whether it's Betty and Barney Hill or whatever, that they cannot back off. They cannot say, well, maybe I should reconsider that.
Money off those cases, don't they? For decade after decade on the speaking tour. But one thing I also want to say too is I appreciate the fact that, if you're or you're inputting your information, where this is going. You are not anonymous. You're not, this is very forthright. And I really tell people out there, if you are going to report something like this, make sure you know where your information is going. And even though there's this brand new app that looks really cool, and hey, we can get on there and just put in all our information, and who knows who can track us and do A, B, C, and D, don't do it. Make sure you find an organization like Aerial Phenomena Investigations to give your information to, because it's really important.
We will never share your personal information, including your email address, with anyone. And we'll only email you about the case. And after that, you won't hear from us again. Unless you want, you can contact us anytime you want, but you won't. Yeah.
I was incensed when I found out MUFON sold private data. I was incensed. To Bigelow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
How did they justify that?
They
You know,
didn't.
this is the $1,000,000 question. I think that they justified it because they saw money and they were perhaps convinced that he was doing things with,
Well, he was doing things all right.
yes, he was.
Oh my God, those people. I just couldn't. Hey, did you know Elaine Douglas, Erica?
I never met her, but
Really?
having, I took over for her, which was an interesting experience. And I was trying to get all of her files and get them here to Utah in a safe place so I could continue, build upon what she had done, specifically with her investigations into MUFON and different people in the field. And unfortunately, that was somebody got wind of that, and at the last minute, I'd just gotten my truck ready to go and taken time off work, and I was going to drive across 2 states to get her information. And a person at MUFON came in and took up all the information.
Man, I tell you what, I joined MUFON about the time that they had this fracture, and I'd been in touch with Elaine Douglas because she was the faction that was pushing for transparency. How dare you take people's information? How dare you not be transparent with public information? And this other faction was fighting, in my estimation, nefarious means and nefarious ends. And she and a bunch of others got shoved to the side. I think she got fired or whatever. And I think she went down fighting the good fight. I know she had cancer and she died of cancer. And she fought the good fight on that, and she lost. Transparency and openness and clarity and integrity got lost in MUFON, in my opinion, at that point. And I stopped my affiliation with them. If you do not have integrity, I will not associate with you.
I would love to have you back on the show again and or have a kind of conversation with you about that, because, trying to take over for her and trying to get information from other people in MUFON so I could make my investigations better. And so I could have a lay of the land, because I knew there were some interesting dynamics going on.
Yes.
And yet the same people in MUFON wouldn't give me any information. And it was just like, the whole thing was such a trip. And at the end of the day, I respect her for pushing for transparency. And it's really sad that her files are, some of them are available, but the good stuff.
She did, from what I understand, she did good work. Paul and I got some MUFON investigators that wanted to join API. And a couple of them, I remember one wanted to be API and MUFON, and there was something, little alarm bells went off about that. Something about that just didn't seem right. But the couple of people
like that,
yeah, they didn't work out because they really we found that they didn't really nail down information. To be really precise here, where was the guy located? Well, yeah, we don't have to do that. And they just really took umbrage that we would come back because we do a review of these things. And Paul catches stuff with me all the time. I'm such an idiot, especially when it comes UTC, and he says, that's 2 hours the wrong way, Marsha. Oy vey. And so I have to fix it. There goes my case. It really makes me mad. But anyway, this is the value of that.
Our policy now.
They didn't like that.
Our policy now is that you have to choose between us and MUFON.
Paul told them, take a hike. This is how we're doing business.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I saw so many interesting things with MUFON. I had to run screaming for the hills. And at the end of the day, I didn't feel that there were a lot of things going on that just weren't right on multiple fronts. The buying and selling of data, or selling of data, pushing it into a black hole, promoting conspiracy theories and just out there ideas.
Yeah, I made that part of our ethics statement, and part of our FAQ is that we will not sell a case file, and we will not sell a story.
And we will not give people's
that belongs to the witness. If they want to sell their story, they can. If they want to sell their case file, they can. But we will not do that. And that's part of our one small part of our ethics statement. And that's one thing I would, if you're going to tell your story to anyone, any investigator, they should have a public ethics statement of what they will do, what they will not do, and what they consider to be their values.
That is your covenant with a witness.
So we won't, we put basically the number one is we put their well-being first, and number two is we maintain their privacy, and that really sums it up. And we don't own their story, and we don't own their case. They do, and we have the information. We're going to keep it for our research, but we're not going to sell it. I'm not interested really ever in being involved in entertainment. I know early on in API's history, we thought about maybe joining.
Antonio wanted to be the next Ancient Aliens guy, I think. That didn't pan out.
He wanted a little trip up to Skinwalker.
Well, but then National Geographic came out with this terrible show called Chasing UFOs. Chasing UFOs, I think it was called, and it was it involved James
UFOs.
Fox. He was very disappointed in the show, but it was just really bad. They had to have a cliffhanger at every commercial, so they would invent some stupid cliffhanger.
Show business.
And then Antonio wanted to do that briefly, but it didn't work out, and I was happy that it didn't. And so we're not going to get involved in entertainment. And that's just how that is. And most of our cases are not very entertaining. We have a few that are, but we have witness privacy to protect. And so we can contact the witness and say, hey, if you want to talk to National Geographic, knock yourself out. But we're not, not involved in that. And because I think the entertainment has been part of the problem.
Right.
Well, it can be. I mean,
look at the current Skinwalker Rat show. It's they're so desperate to entertain that they're inventing things that are just not true or not interesting.
But those rocket launches, those are good. That is exactly the way I would conduct research. Right? Look, there's something in the sky. Let's shoot a rocket at it. Okay. I mean, I don't even know.
Well, there's plenty of pieces of the pie that people can get involved in this business and in this, this type of work. And, there's room for everybody. Bad characters, I think, need to be found and tarred and feathered. But as soon as you tar and feather one guy, then they pop back up. But I don't want to denigrate those other people who are doing that work. I mean, everybody, this is just our bailiwick. This is just, and I tell Paul this, and he hates the term. We're a little boutique investigative agency. And as a man, he doesn't want to hear boutique, but I'm sorry, that's what we are. And we do this specialized little thing.
Yeah, the word boutique has nothing that I've ever been associated with.
Okay, well, see, that's why I hate it.
But I like
but anyway,
it.
that's kind of what we are. A very little small niche. We had this little, we aren't trying to get rich. We aren't trying to get famous. All we like to do is the work. The work is fun. I love figuring out what this person experienced or saw. I just love it. I hate when I go down to the end and there's nothing there and I have to write unidentified. But I'll do it because, damn it, it's unidentified. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a few good cases that are unidentified and a few not very good cases that are unidentified just because we couldn't find anything. But they could easily be balloons or drones or something. When you find a case like that, you say, well, it's consistent with X, but we can't show that we're not sure it's X. Or it's 99% consistent with X, and maybe the witness misremembered something.
It's low strangeness, and then we get to put the low strangeness.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing is,
but it's not strange. It didn't.
Yeah, we tag all our cases with a strangeness rating, 0 to 5. 0 is explained, identified. 5 is just like crazy strange, and like those humanoid cases in Europe in the 50s, those are like 5s, but and that allows other researchers to look at our cases and filter out the things that are just not that interesting, even though they're unidentified. So if it's a strangeness of 1, and we call it unidentified, it's probably not worth your time to get into. If you call it a 2 or a 3, then it might be. And likewise, we give a case quality rating, which is basically, we call it probability. It's not really probabilities, case quality. And that's 0 to 5 as well. 0 is a hoax. 5 is slam dunk. And we've never had a 5. We've had a few 0s, but I would consider the Skylab 3 case to be a 5. We had everything there. We had 3 highly qualified witnesses. We had lots of documentation. We had photographs. Is it that strange? No, it's really not that strange. I would rate it maybe a 2 out of 5 tops, but it's a 5 case quality. It's that's usually the trade-off you get. You don't get 5 5s hardly ever.
You need to feed your dog.
I know. I'm sorry.
They've been fed.
Well, apparently not.
No, they're just.
They would beg to differ.
They get very excitable when somebody comes home.
I'm sorry because I could keep going for the next 4 hours.
Look, it's 2 minutes.
Have you guys
2 hours
back.
15. Wow. Here we go.
Yeah, you guys will have to be regular guests, and I just want to echo what Erica was saying, that if you're listening, if you're watching, if you want to learn some of the technicalities about actual UFOs and UFO sightings, this is the organization to do it with. They have training videos. They'll talk with you. They'll work with you. Report your UFO to folks like this that are making a commitment to work with you one-on-one, to
being transparent about who they are,
trustworthy, and to do rational evidence-based.
And I'd like to add one thing. If you want to be a field investigator and you have a lot of patience and a lot of persistence, and you just heard Marsha explain some of these cases, how they go, get in touch and we'll talk. We've had a lot of investigators that have left after a few months because they realized that it was a lot of work and we weren't, you weren't seeing a lot of Martians.
Glamour. No glamour.
So it wasn't very glamorous. But every once in a while we get a great case. I can't promise you that.
We get a lot of great cases. We get to identify them.
Well, most of them are slam dunk identified, but if you get in touch, if you're interested, you will work a lot of cases that are Starlink or balloons or whatever. So it's not going to be all fun, but we need to get that backlog worked off. So,
but thanks for the opportunity, you guys. It was really wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for going over time. And again, it's been a great conversation. I knew it would be. So Marsha and Paul, I hope have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the beautiful summer. And then we will catch you guys very soon.
All right. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care, you guys. Bye, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Good night. So I thank you guys for being here. And I want to just thank Drew and Rachel and Scott and Amy and Rodan and everybody. I've got to go back. Peter, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't ask your question, but you guys are really important to creating this community that we've created. We're all here because we think this is a very fascinating topic for multiple reasons. We've created a safe place for people to talk about things. And that is my commitment to you, that I will continue to do that and make sure that we are operating with the highest amount of integrity, just like the 2 people we spoke with, for this wonderful interview. That's important. We need that in this subject. So I thank you to all the people that support us. You can go to aerialphenomena.com expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out their website. You can also go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out our latest blog and to sign up for the email list. So make sure you guys click, like, and subscribe, and we will catch you next week. Thanks, Jack. And thanks, Mario, and everybody. Have a good weekend.